The wind howled mercilessly through the dense pines, whipping up the fresh blanket of snow that had fallen just hours earlier. Icicles clung to branches like frozen daggers, and the bitter cold seemed to seep into every corner of the small mountain town nestled in the valley below. Winter had arrived early, and with an unforgiving roar blanketing the landscape in white and cutting off many of the winding roads with drifts taller than a man. Inside a cramped volunteer rescue station, Emma wiped the sweat from her brow despite the chill in the air. Her breath formed quick clouds as she moved about, checking equipment and listening intently to the crackling radio. The storm had made communications spotty, but the urgency of the night's work kept everyone alert. The town's animal rescue team was on high alert. The sudden cold snap had caught many by surprise, not just people but the animals who had nowhere to hide. Suddenly the radio burst to life. "Emma, we've got a call from a hiker on the North Ridge Trail. They said they heard barking, faint but persistent, like an animal in trouble." "It sounded scared," came the voice of Mark, another volunteer, tense with worry. Emma's heart tightened. North Ridge was deep in the forest, remote, rugged, and nearly impossible to access in this weather, but she knew they had no choice. "Let's gear up and move out. We can't leave anything to chance," she replied, already pulling on her thermal jacket and gloves. Outside, the storm was relentless. Snowflakes the size of coins battered against the windows, and gusts whipped through the trees with such force the whole building trembled. Emma's team packed their rescue van with essentials: heavy blankets, first aid kits, flashlights, and warming packs. Every second counted. The van's tires crunched over the thick snow as they headed toward the trailhead, headlights barely cutting through the swirling white. The radio remained eerily silent except for the static hum until the faintest bark drifted to their ears through the open window. It was faint, weak, but unmistakable. Emma exchanged looks with her teammates. "That's her. We're close." Navigating the treacherous icy road was slow and nerve-wracking. At one point, the van slid on a patch of black ice, forcing Emma to wrestle the wheel back under control. "Careful," Mark muttered, eyes wide. Finally, they reached the trailhead, where the forest swallowed the narrow path like a dark cavern. The temperature gauge on the dashboard read well below freezing, and the howling wind made the silence inside the van feel heavy. Emma switched on her flashlight and stepped out, the cold immediately biting into her exposed face. She scanned the snow-covered ground, searching for any sign of movement. Then she saw it, paw prints, fresh and small, leading deeper into the woods. They were erratic, as if the dog had been struggling to find shelter. The team moved in single file, crunching through the snow, ears straining to catch any sound beyond the wind. Each step felt heavier than the last. The freezing cold seeped through their boots and the snow seemed endless. Suddenly a soft whimper echoed through the trees. "Over here," Emma whispered, moving toward the sound. Beneath a twisted pine, half buried in snow, was a golden retriever, her fur matted and frozen with ice. She was curled up in a tight ball, shivering violently. Her eyes flickered open, revealing a mixture of fear and fierce determination. The dog's ribs showed through her thinning coat, a sign she had been struggling for days. Emma knelt slowly, careful not to startle her. "Hey girl, we're here to help." The dog didn't move away. Instead, she lifted her head slightly but stayed curled tightly, as if protecting something beneath her. Emma's breath caught. The dog's body was not just curled for warmth. There was something underneath her, something small. Her teammates gathered around, shining their flashlights down to reveal a tiny bundle nestled against the dog's belly. Emma's voice trembled as she whispered, "Oh my God, what is that?" The wind howled louder as the team prepared to uncover the secret the dog had fought to keep safe, unaware that what they were about to find would change everything. The cold pressed in from all sides, biting through thick coats and biting even deeper into the heart. Emma's hands trembled slightly as she reached down, brushing the icy snow away from the dog's golden fur. Beneath the dog's protective curve, she glimpsed two tiny, quivering forms, fragile, silent, and still barely breathing. The rescuers. They exchanged glances, hearts pounding. This was no ordinary rescue. The dog wasn't simply seeking shelter for herself. She was shielding these newborns, tiny kittens who were clearly struggling against the unforgiving cold. 2 kittens, Mark murmured, eyes wide with disbelief. How did she find them out here? Emma felt a swell of admiration mixed with a deep sadness. Whoever this dog was, she had been out here for days, perhaps longer, fighting the storm to keep these fragile lives alive. The snow was packed hard beneath them, and the faint warmth from the dog's body was all that stood between the kittens and death. The dog lifted her tired head again, watching them cautiously, her eyes pleading for help. Emma slowly pulled her jacket over the bundle to keep them warm. "We need to get them out of here. Now," Emma said, urgency threading through her voice. Carefully, the team wrapped the dog and kittens in thermal blankets they had brought, whispering soft reassurances to calm the frightened dog. The golden retriever, who now seemed less afraid, let out a faint whimper and pressed herself even closer to the kittens, as if warning the rescuers to move slowly. The trek back to the rescue van was grueling. Each step sank deep into powdery snow, the wind lashing at their faces, freezing their fingers and toes. The path that had seemed short on the way in now felt like a treacherous journey through a white wilderness. Emma kept looking back to ensure the dog was still with them, her figure small and brave amid the swirling storm. She was amazed how the dog seemed to summon the last of her strength, struggling not to collapse under the weight of exhaustion. "Almost there," Mark said, voice hoarse from the cold. When the van finally came into view, the team hurriedly lifted the precious cargo inside, shutting the doors against the cold with a satisfying slam. Inside, the heat hit them like a warm wave. Emma immediately wrapped the kittens in dry towels and placed them next to a small heating pad, while a volunteer prepared warm water for the dog. Her breathing was shallow, and the harsh journey had taken a toll, but her eyes never left the tiny kittens. "Who would have thought?" Sarah, another volunteer, whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "A dog protecting kittens in this storm." Emma nodded, her mind racing. Who was this dog? How had she found the kittens? And where had they come from, abandoned in this frozen wasteland? The vet on call, Dr. Kim, arrived moments later, her face serious as she quickly assessed the situation. "These kittens are hypothermic and severely dehydrated," she said, her fingers gentle but efficient as she checked their tiny bodies. "And the dog. She's severely malnourished and exhausted. They wouldn't have survived much longer out there." Emma glanced at the dog, now resting her head on her paws but alert, as if guarding her precious charges even in this unfamiliar place. She wanted to ask so many questions, but first they had to stabilize everyone. Dr. Kim gently wrapped the kittens in warm cloths, placing them in an incubator. She smiled softly at the dog, who watched every movement intently. "Do you have a name for her?" she asked. "No," Emma replied quietly, "but I think she deserves one. Something strong." The team settled into a tense wait as the shelter staff worked through the night. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, a fragile hope was blossoming. Emma couldn't shake the image of the dog curled in the snow, guarding those helpless kittens like they were her own. It was a powerful act of love, one that transcended species, survival, and instinct. As she sat beside the incubator, Emma whispered, "We'll get you through this. You saved them once. We won't let anything happen now." The night stretched. On each minute a battle against the cold and the odds. But the rescuers knew one thing for certain. This dog's courage had given those tiny kittens a chance at life, warmth, and a future they could never have imagined. The first fragile light of dawn seeped through the shelter's frosted windows, casting a pale glow on the tired faces of the rescue team. The storm outside had softened into a quiet snow, but the weight of the night lingered in the air. Silent reminder of the lives hanging by a thread. Emma sat close to the golden retriever, who had been quietly resting in a corner on a warm blanket. The dog's fur was still damp and matted, and faint shivers ran through her frame, but her eyes held a steady strength. It was as if she knew she had done something extraordinary, something that transcended her own suffering. The team had decided to name her Serena, a name meaning calm, peace, and strength. It felt fitting for a dog who had been a silent guardian in the heart of a violent storm, but what puzzled them most was not just the act of survival. It was the story Serena carried in her silence. How had she found the kittens? Why had she chosen to protect them when they were so different from her? Emma's mind kept returning to the image of Serena, curled in the snow, the snowflakes melting against her warm fur as she huddled over the fragile lives beneath her. The instinct to protect had outweighed every other need: hunger, cold, pain. That kind of devotion was rare, and it had saved lives. As the shelter staff prepared a nourishing meal for Serena, the dog remained calm but alert, watching every movement with quiet intensity. When the food was placed before her, she hesitated, then ate with careful, deliberate bites. "It's like she's pacing herself," said Mark, observing. "She's still so weak, but she's focused on staying strong for those kittens." Meanwhile, the tiny kittens were beginning to stir in the incubator. Their breathing grew steadier, and their eyes flickered open to reveal glassy, fragile orbs adjusting to the harsh new world they had been born into. They looked so vulnerable, yet the bond they shared with Serena was unmistakable. Emma reached out a cautious hand, stroking one of the tiny heads. The kittens whimpered softly, but seemed to respond to the touch. "Do you think Serena knows they're awake?" Sarah asked, eyes shining with emotion. Emma nodded slowly. "She does. She's been waiting for this moment." As the morning wore on, the team took turns caring for the trio, monitoring the kitten's temperature and feeding Serena small amounts of water. Each movement felt deliberate, as if the dog's energy was being carefully conserved. In the quiet, moments, Emma noticed Serena's gaze often flickering toward the kitten's incubator, her posture tense but protective. Whenever anyone approached, Serena subtly shifted her body as if positioning herself to shield the kittens from any danger. It was a silent promise. "I am their guardian. I will not let anything harm them." Later that afternoon, Emma decided to examine Serena more closely. With the help of Dr. Kim, she gently checked for injuries or signs of illness. The dog flinched when touched near her ribs, where bruises and cuts hinted at a hard struggle. "Looks like she's been through a lot, Doctor," Kim said quietly. "But her spirit is unbroken. That's what counts." Emma wrapped Serena in a warm fleece blanket and settled beside her. "You saved those kittens," she whispered. "You gave them a chance when no one else would." Serena lifted her head and licked Emma's hand, a small but powerful gesture of trust. The team began piecing together what little they knew. The kittens were likely orphaned, left behind in the forest during the storm, or abandoned by a frightened mother. Serena, a dog without puppies of her own, had somehow found them and taken on the role of protector, a guardian angel in the freezing wilderness. As night approached again, the shelter buzzed with cautious hope. Serena rested beside the incubator, her breath slow and steady, while the kittens nestled close together, gaining strength. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. This wasn't just a rescue. It was a story of love against all odds, a story that reminded everyone there was still kindness in a world that often felt harsh and cold, and Serena, the silent protector, was its beating heart. The shelter had quieted as night settled over the town, but inside the warmth was a fragile shield against the chill that lingered in the hearts of those who knew how close they had come to losing everything. Emma sat beside the incubator, where the two tiny kittens rested, their little chests rising and falling with slow, steady breaths. Wrapped in soft towels, their fragile forms looked almost unreal, like delicate miracles wrapped in warmth and light. Across the room, Serena lay curled on her blanket, her eyes half closed but watchful, as if guarding an invisible secret. Emma's thoughts drifted back to the moment they had first found Serena in the snow, curled tightly around those tiny kittens, a silent protector in a frozen world. It was hard to imagine the strength it took for a dog, exhausted and starving, to hold herself together long enough to keep those helpless creatures alive. What could have happened to them? Sarah asked softly, breaking Emma's reverie. Emma shook her head. They were probably abandoned or lost. But who would have left them out there in a storm like that? The question hung in the air, heavy with sorrow. No one could know the kitten's full story, but Serena's was becoming clearer. The dog's instinct to protect was extraordinary. She hadn't just curled up for warmth. She had made a deliberate choice to shield the kittens, to become their guardian, even though they were a different species. It was a quiet act of defiance against the harshness of the world. Later, Dr. Kim returned with a hopeful report. "The kittens are stable now," she said, smiling softly. "Their temperatures are rising, and they're starting to respond to feeding. Serena is gaining strength too. This is a miracle." Emma felt a swell of relief, but there was still much to do. That evening, Emma approached Serena gently, carrying a bowl of warm broth. The dog lifted her head, eyes filled with cautious hope. Emma set the bowl near her, watching as Serena lapped the liquid slowly, conserving her energy. As Serena drank, Emma reached out and brushed her fur. The dog leaned into the touch, a rare moment of trust and tenderness. Suddenly, Serena's ears perked up. She stood carefully, her body still weak but alert. Emma followed her gaze to the kittens, now stirring softly in the incubator. Without hesitation, Serena moved closer, her nose gently nudging the glass as if checking on them. The bond between them was undeniable. "Look at that," Sarah whispered, eyes shining. "She's their mother in every way that counts." The next days passed with slow, steady progress. Serena began eating more, regaining strength, while the kittens grew stronger by the hour. The shelter staff marveled at the growing bond between them, how Serena would lie quietly beside the incubator, always watchful, always protective. One afternoon, Emma noticed Serena trying something extraordinary. With the help of a staff member, they opened the incubator just enough for the kittens to crawl out. Serena's tail wagged gently as the kittens wobbled onto the soft blankets beside her. The sight was heart-stopping, the golden retriever patiently allowing the kittens to snuggle against her, licking their tiny heads and softly nudging them to nurse. It was a family, forged in the snow and strengthened by love. Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "You saved them," she whispered to Serena. "You didn't have to, but you did." Serena's gentle eyes met Emma's, as if understanding every word. The shelter shared the story with local news and social media, and it spread quickly. People from all over were moved by the tale of the dog who risked everything for the kittens, reminding everyone of the unexpected miracles that could happen in the coldest, darkest places. But for Emma and the team, the story was more than news. It was a lesson in compassion, resilience, and hope. As Serena settled down for the night, surrounded by the kittens she had saved, Emma whispered a promise into the quiet room. "We'll make sure you all get the life you deserve." Outside, the storm had passed, but the warmth inside was only just beginning. The shelter's hum of activity never ceased, even as the deep freeze of winter pressed down on the mountain town outside. Inside, the small triad, Serena and her two tiny kittens, became the focus of every heartbeat, every breath. Their fragile lives hung in delicate balance, and the staff worked tirelessly, knowing the stakes were higher than ever. Serena, once a strong and graceful golden retriever, now moved slowly, weighed down by exhaustion and malnutrition. But her eyes, fierce and unyielding, remained fixed on the kittens she had saved. She refused to rest until she knew they were safe. Dr. Kim monitored them closely, her calm hands working with practiced precision as she warmed the kittens, administered fluids, and offered gentle encouragement to Serena. "They're survivors," she said, voice steady but filled with awe. "And so is she." The kittens were still weak, their tiny bodies fighting the cold that had seeped deep into their bones. Their mews were soft, barely audible over the steady hum of machines and whispered prayers from the shelter staff, but each small movement, a twitch of a paw, a flicker of an eyelid, was a victory. Emma stayed by their side, her heart pounding. Every time one of the kittens stirred, she remembered the moment they found them, how the storm had swallowed the world in ice and silence, and how Serena had been their lone beacon of hope. "We're going to get through this," Emma whispered to Serena one chilly evening, gently stroking the dog's fur. Serena responded by nuzzling her hand, a fragile connection in a world that had been so harsh. But as the hours dragged on, the battle against the cold and exhaustion took its toll. One of the kittens, the smaller of the two, began to weaken, its tiny frame growing limp and unresponsive. Panic surged through the room. "We need to stabilize him, now," Dr. Kim ordered, urgency sharp in her voice. The staff sprang into action, wrapping the kitten in warmed blankets, placing him under a radiant heat lamp and administering critical fluids. Serena whimpered softly, sensing the crisis. Her body trembling as she tried to inch closer, Emma held the kitten gently, tears threatening to spill. "Hold on, little one, we're here. You're safe." The night was long and fraught with tension. Every minute felt like an eternity as the shelter team worked to pull the kitten back from the brink. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, signs of life returned. The kitten's chest rose and fell with renewed strength, and a faint but hopeful mew escaped. Its tiny throat, relief, flooded the room. "He's responding," Dr. Kim announced, exhaustion evident in her voice. "But we're not out of the woods yet." Throughout the ordeal, Serena remained a steady presence, her eyes never leaving the kitten's fragile form. Despite her own weakness, she nuzzled him gently, as if lending strength through her love alone. Days passed, and the kitten's condition stabilized. The other kitten grew stronger as well, their bodies filling out with warmth and life. Serena's own recovery was slower, but her spirit seemed unbreakable. She began eating more, her tail wagging faintly as she responded to the kindness around her. The shelter team marveled at the resilience of the trio, survivors bound by an unbreakable bond forged in the worst of conditions. Emma found herself drawn to Serena more each day. She would sit beside her, whispering stories of warmth, safety, and a future filled with love. Serena's eyes would soften, a quiet gratitude shining through. One afternoon, as the sun filtered weakly through the windows, Emma noticed Serena gently licking one of the kittens. It was a small, tender gesture, a reaffirmation of the fierce, protective instinct that had saved them all. The storm had passed, but the fight for life was far from over. Yet in that room, surrounded by soft blankets and hopeful hearts, something extraordinary was happening. A family was healing. The days at the shelter rolled by with a comforting rhythm, a rhythm filled with soft purrs, gentle licks, and the slow but steady healing of 3 lives once on the brink. Serena, the golden retriever whose courage had defied the storm, was now slowly reclaiming her strength. Each morning she greeted the day with a little more energy, her tail wagging ever so slightly, a quiet signal that the worst was behind them. The kittens too were thriving. Their fur grew fluffy and warm, their eyes bright and curious. Emma watched them one afternoon as they tumbled over each other, tiny paws batting playfully at loose threads of blanket. It was hard to believe that just weeks ago they had been fighting for survival in the cold wilderness, abandoned, helpless, and destined to perish if not for Serena's fierce protection. The bond between Serena and the kittens deepened with every passing moment. Serena had become their mother in every sense of the word, gentle, watchful, and unyielding in her devotion. The way she groomed them, sheltered them from drafts, and nudged them toward food was nothing short of miraculous. But the shelter was not home. It was a temporary refuge, a place of healing and hope. Emma knew the time was coming when Serena and her kittens would need a permanent family, a safe place to grow beyond the confines of cold hospital walls. One chilly morning, Emma sat beside Serena, running her fingers through the dog's golden fur. Serena rested her head on Emma's knee, eyes heavy with tiredness but bright with trust. "You're almost ready, girl," Emma whispered softly, "almost ready for a new life." The kittens, sensing the change in the air, cuddled close to Serena, their tiny bodies warm and content. One of them, the smallest, stretched a fragile paw toward Emma, batting playfully at her sleeve. Emma laughed quietly, tears of joy welling in her eyes. The shelter had begun the search for foster homes, vetting families who could provide love and care for the trio. But Emma hoped for something more, a forever home where Serena and her kittens could thrive together, never again facing the dangers of the wild. Meanwhile, Serena's health improved steadily. Her coat grew shinier, her eyes brighter, and her playful spirit began to emerge once more. She followed Emma around the shelter with a tentative eagerness, wagging her tail and occasionally nudging the kitten's enclosure, as if to say, "Look, how far we've come." The kittens began to explore beyond the incubator, wobbling unsteadily on their feet but determined to discover the world around them. Serena watched with patience, guiding them gently and intervening whenever one strayed too far. One afternoon, a volunteer brought a camera to capture the moment. Emma smiled as she watched the photos later, Serena lying protectively over the kittens, their tiny heads nestled against her warm fur, eyes closed in peaceful sleep. It was a portrait of resilience and hope, a testament to the power of love, in the face of unimaginable odds. Yet the story wasn't finished. As the kittens grew stronger, the shelter arranged veterinary checks to ensure their health and to start the process of vaccinations and care for adoption. Serena, too, was examined thoroughly to confirm she was ready for a new chapter. Emma accompanied Serena during the vet visits, whispering soothing words as the dog endured shots and tests. Serena's trust in Emma was palpable, a silent bond, forged through hardship and healing. One evening, after a long day of care, Emma sat beside Serena in the quiet of the shelter's recovery room. The dog rested her head on Emma's lap, eyes closing in contentment. "We've come so far," Emma said softly, "and soon you'll find a family that loves you like you deserve." For Serena, the journey had begun in the frozen wilderness. Alone, scared, but fiercely determined. Now it was ending with hope, love, and the promise of a future where she could be safe and cherished. As the last light of day faded, Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude for the courage of a dog who had braved the storm, for the tiny lives she had saved, and for the chance to witness a family reborn. The day had arrived, the day Emma and the shelter team had both hoped for and dreaded. It was the day Serena and her kittens would leave the safety of the shelter and begin the next chapter of their lives. The family that had been forged in the cold wilderness, nurtured through endless nights and tireless care, was finally ready for a permanent home. But parting was bittersweet. Emma's heart ached as she packed the essentials: soft blankets, the kitten's favorite toys, and a collar for Serena. Each item was a reminder of the journey they'd shared, of the fragile lives held together by love and courage. Serena lay quietly on her blanket, sensing the change in the air. Her eyes, once wary and guarded, now shone with calm trust as Emma knelt beside her. "Are you ready, girl?" Emma whispered, gently brushing Serena's ears. The kittens, now plump and lively, tumbled playfully around the room, their small voices filling the space with hopeful energy. They didn't yet understand the meaning of leaving, but they sensed the anticipation. The shelter team gathered to say goodbye, a small circle of people united by a story of survival and devotion. Sarah held one of the kittens close, her eyes misty. "You've all come so far," she said softly, "and now it's time for your next adventure." The new family had arrived earlier that morning, a kind couple named Laura and David who had been carefully vetted and trained by the shelter to provide a loving home for the trio. Their eyes sparkled with warmth and excitement as they entered the room. Laura crouched down first, extending a gentle hand towards Serena. The dog hesitated for a moment, then cautiously sniffed before resting her head on Laura's palm. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. David smiled as he watched the kittens, who curiously explored their new surroundings. "They're beautiful," he said quietly, "and so lucky to have you." Emma felt a lump in her throat. This was what she had worked toward, finding the perfect home for Serena and her kittens, a place where love could heal every scar left by their past. Carefully, Emma helped Laura lift Serena into the car, then followed with the kittens safely, nestled in a cozy carrier. The journey ahead was unknown, but the promise was clear, a future filled with safety, warmth, and love. Before leaving, Laura turned to Emma with a grateful smile. "Thank you for everything. We'll give them the life they deserve." Emma nodded, tears brimming. "They saved each other," she said. "Now it's time for them to be saved by love." As the car disappeared down the snowy road, the shelter felt emptier, but also filled with hope. Serena and her kittens had survived the storm and found their way to a new beginning. Back inside the shelter, Emma returned to her duties, the memory of the trio's journey etched deeply in her heart. She knew that this story would stay with her forever, a reminder of the resilience of life and the power of compassion. Later that evening, Emma received a message from Laura, a photo of Serena lying contentedly with the kittens, their bodies intertwined like a family. The caption read, "Home at last, safe and loved." Emma smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. It was a simple picture, but it carried the weight of a miracle. The story of a dog who had braved the cold to protect those she loved, now finally safe in the arms of a family. As night fell, Emma looked out at the stars, feeling a quiet peace. The storm had passed, but the story of Serena and her kittens was far from over. It was a story of hope, of healing, and of the unbreakable bonds that can form when kindness meets courage. Weeks had passed since Serena and her kittens left the shelter, but their story was far from over. Emma found herself thinking about them, often heart swelling with hope and quiet pride. The bond they had shared, born in the biting cold of a merciless storm, had blossomed into something unbreakable. One crisp morning, a package arrived at the shelter. Inside was a letter from Laura and David, accompanied by photographs that told a beautiful story. The first photo showed Serena lying peacefully on a soft couch, her golden fur glowing in the afternoon sunlight. She looked healthy, happy, and at peace. The fierce protector now relaxed in the warmth of her new home. The next images captured the kittens as they grew, playful and curious, tumbling over each other and exploring a sun-dappled garden. They were thriving, safe from the dangers of the wild, nurtured by a family who loved them deeply. Emma smiled as she read Laura's words. "Serena is incredible. She watches over the kittens like a devoted mother, just like she did when you found them. Every day we see the strength and love she carried through the storm. They are our little miracles." The story had touched countless hearts, spreading far beyond the small mountain town where it had begun. People who heard about Serena's bravery were inspired, reminded that even in the darkest moments, hope and love could shine through. Emma felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was why she did the work, to save lives, to give voice to stories that could change hearts and to remind the world that kindness still existed. Back at the shelter, life continued. New animals arrived needing help, new stories waiting to be told. But Serena and her kittens remained a shining beacon, a testament to resilience, to courage, and to the power of love that crosses species and circumstances. One afternoon, as Emma walked through the shelter's yard, she noticed a group of children gathered near the fence. They were listening intently as one of the volunteers shared the story of Serena and the kittens, the dog who had braved the storm to save her. Little family. Emma approached quietly, watching as the children's eyes widened with wonder and hope. One little girl, clutching a small stuffed animal, looked up and whispered, "I want to be brave like Serena." Emma's heart ached with tenderness. That was the true legacy of Serena's story, inspiring courage, compassion, and a belief that even the smallest among us could make a difference. That evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, Emma sat by the shelter window, reflecting on the journey. The storm had tested them all, but it had also revealed something profound, that love in its purest form could save lives and heal wounds that seemed beyond repair. She thought of Serena, curled up in her new home with the kittens, safe, loved and finally at peace, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, stories like this would continue to light the way, because sometimes a dog curled up in the cold, protecting the most vulnerable, could change the world.